Next speaker for the day is architect Deepa and architect Dinesh Rao. The topic is fourth semester studio.
We're talking about semester 4, which is housing studio. I think should be fine. No?
Yeah, it's okay.
Which is a studio where they study housing. We particularly chose it because we find that housing is one of the primary requirements, primary needs of a person. And most of the work that architects get to do is within this arena of housing. And it's grossly underrepresented in the 8 semesters. When they come to semester 4, they have just done semester 3 with placemaking, they have studied climatology, they've studied building services, but they haven't yet designed a dwelling in 3 semesters prior to this. So this is the first time they're actually looking at living spaces and presented with issues which are at a much, much larger level. We also found that when we normally teach, when we take a studio at semester 4 level, students come there absolutely foxed. They seem to have somewhere down the line forgotten all their anthropometrics that they did in semester 1 and 2, and we have to literally start from scratch. Designing small workplaces, designing living spaces, designing places to cook in and eat in, and then they wind up putting these things together like a bunch of blocks, without actually looking at the various issues that housing does bring. So how does one work this? Okay, this is the design studio as it has been specified. The objectives,
Yeah, the objectives are, I think, to understand the difference in housing as a process and a product, the role of an architect in creating the product and facilitating the process, understanding the needs of privacy, communal spaces, efficiency of open spaces, and ideas of extended living spaces, to differentiate and understand the nature of organic and planned communities.
So in principle...
Yeah, in principle, it looks fine actually as a starting point. But I think when in the elaboration of this and the use of examples that we start seeing issues.
Next. So this is how it has been outlined.
The scale of the project shall be limited to allow for intensive study rather than repetition of typical configuration. While this is stated at the outset, and we agree entirely with this, the kind of examples that we have seen and what we have also encountered in the studios is that we do tend to get into extremely large projects and an immense amount of repetition. It also says housing projects can be attempted with added complexities. For example, dense context, occupation-based, traditional urban fabric. Social status and prevalent social strata. Here again, all very good in principle, but also does not generally happen. We find pretty much that we are designing for urban elites in the studio.
Also, by and large, what happens in design studios at this level is that students are presented with these very, very large sites, which are like about 2 acres or so, and they are cramming in 100 to 200 apartments through the semester. For children who really don't have a clue about designing a dwelling and the kind of dwellings and the kind of needs that people have for housing, to suddenly jump into these kind of projects is fairly beyond what they can handle. Apart from which, they haven't even addressed a single issue on the nature of a housing need in the city and around the city. Yeah.
Here again it says that the design shall be sensitive to the needs of the disabled, aged people and children. I think everybody else also mentioned that. Context for design problems could be both rural and urban. I'm yet to see a rural housing project ever.
Yeah. In fact, the examples given within the outline of the curriculum, the examples actually state apartments for IT employees. I mean, what is that? I don't know how you can actually write that down in an outline. government servants, teaching faculty, textile weavers. Luxury flats in the center of the city, and by and large, this is what they wind up doing. So we have a lot of questions out here as to what are the needs of the city, what are the needs of the country, what are the needs of the state, and what are we actually doing? Is that the only direction that a graduate student has to look at? And we virtually are telling them that this is the kind of work that is expected of you.
And at this level, at the studio level, they really cannot deal with the levels of complexity that we're talking about. So we really see a need to use this period to actually just expose them to the issues. And the actual designing component is just going to be a part of the overall studio.
Yeah, I'd like to go through this a bit of information. It's a person without a permanent house, as defined by the Census of India, is referred to as homeless. 78 million people are homeless in India. This is the 2013 census. Urban India now has 9.42 lakh homeless people. So what has been happening is, due to loss of employment in agriculture, in the villages, and other allied rural modes of employment, people are migrating to the city in great amounts, and in the last 5 years, urban homeless numbers have increased by 2 to 3 million over rural homeless. That is absolutely crazy. Earlier the balance was homeless were many more in the rural population and not in the urban, and now it's tilting towards the urban population. Now we cannot actually emphasize it enough that who is it that we are designing for? Who is it that students are looking at as people who need homes to be designed for? Yeah.
And ironically, in fact, I read recently something which Naresh had put up, that I believe out of the new housing stock in Bangalore, something like 54% remains unsold and unoccupied. So we're looking at a really bizarre situation, and I think the architectural community has a role to play in this.
So I'd like to just read this out. Given the extent and gravity of issues of housing in India, we feel that it's vital to expose students to the breadth of approaches already in existence. In the space of a single design studio, however, it may not be feasible without also using other devices such as seminars and study tours. First-hand information, unless encouraged by the studio itself, is just not attempted by the semester, so actually we need to weave it into the curriculum. So in our experience, students at SEM 4 stage seem to be unprepared for complex issues posed by housing. Yeah, it would be a significant step forward if they were exposed to directions in housing other than dominant financial models available to urban elites. Students, for instance, aren't even aware of other models of financing housing. I think if they can study fairly complex biology and calculus in standard 12, I don't understand why we don't introduce students to this at semester 4. It's not rocket science, it's fairly easy to see and to understand, at least intuitively get a feel of reality, and we go nowhere near it. So we propose a 3-component approach to the design studio, and we believe learning in a design studio doesn't have to only be through project work, but also through other modes of learning, through sharing in seminars or traveling as groups, and studying various kinds of existing settlements, housing projects, and so on. As a corollary, if you actually divide the studio into all these other things, the design projects we recommend will be necessarily limited in size. I can't imagine that there would be capability to actually deal with larger size projects. The visual there is Belapur Artists Housing by Charles Correa. Yeah.
So just a little elaboration. So travel and study tours would involve learning from visiting various settings, urban, rural, traditional, contemporary, permanent, temporary, to introduce them firsthand to students. Seminars are intended to expose students to a gamut of real issues that are integral to their understanding of housing. This could potentially lead to their exploring different approaches to housing.
All I'd like to say is that learning in architecture school as an undergraduate, as many others, so heartened to find that the other speakers before us also emphasize pretty much the same thing. Every semester is virtually an introduction to a particular kind of architectural need. Similarly over here, I just can't imagine people going in and students going in only one direction and them actually not knowing that there are other possibilities available to them. Yeah.
So
projects,
studio projects structure and model design thinking in order to reveal to students the knowledge to be learned and various strategies for unearthing, integrating, and constructing knowledge and ideas in a project. Emphasis in teaching and learning is placed on bridging between the imaginative and conceptual and the material and formal.
Projects often involve activities that encourage students to develop techniques for identifying and negotiating competing demands and prioritizing and ordering variables. Now, even activities which you're talking about in projects are generally, as the syllabus itself specifies, one large project and one small project. I don't see how these large projects are going to fit into the scheme of things like this, without even identifying a single issue that actually is that housing involves. As an essential part of the studio process will be peer reviews and reviews by practicing architects. We strongly recommend this because theory and practice inform each other. Improvisation, exploration, and experimentation, which is supported through public discussion, scrutiny, and peer review, and staff feedback, both internal and visiting. We cannot emphasize enough the need to actually share work, especially at this stage, because it's quite a jump from semester 3 to semester 4, having not handled scales like this. So if possible, talks by various experts in architecture and other disciplines should support the studio. Say if I could perhaps get a sociologist to talk to students in the middle of the housing semester, or perhaps even in the beginning of the housing semester, that would actually greatly help them understand what our discipline is all about. You want to say?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we start with, we feel that one should begin with the study tour or travel. Now, there is a study tour which is apparently mandatory in semester 3.
It's actually the vacation between the third and the fourth.
So, what we would recommend is, since they're actually making this this quantum jump between the first 3 semesters and the rest of the course, this would be a good time to actually select very carefully the kind of study tour that they were venturing out to do. Apart from which, from what I understand, students generally just wind up traveling to Agra and having a very good time there. If that's not available to the students, then I would recommend taking a week out of regular semester and doing another study tour where you either visit a village either around Bangalore or a traditional urban setting within Bangalore, or within whichever city, whether it is Gulbarga or near Tumkur, and you actually study existing settlements which have been built in the traditional way.
Actually, empirically, I could say that from what we have seen, students who have done a settlement study show significantly higher levels of sensitivity in their housing designs.
Now again, they're coming from a placemaking studio, so it's a perfect opportunity to actually look at various ways of grouping together dwellings in a common setting. So we have in that sense, I find that the sequence of studios works out quite well. We were earlier talking about the whole typology-based studio system, which can pose its own problems. But personally, we feel that housing is an exception. I don't think we can actually do away with it. I think housing semester is essential. Because that's something which actually everybody at some time or the other sets out to do, apart from which, if you look at our country, it's a primary need. I don't see how we could ever get away from it. sketches and documentation should show observation and inferences from studies. We're looking at schematic sketches, intuitive understanding, and yes, documentation. This is documentation of Sultanpet in Bangalore, which most of these buildings, within a year of the documentation, were torn down. So they don't even exist anymore. But there's a record of a kilometer by a kilometer of measure drawing of Sultanpet. So what we'd like to say is that studies are there, studies are available, and some of the buildings are still there. And it's high time we all actually use the work that's been done before us and went out there and, we kind of discussed it, showed it, understood it. Yeah. Yeah, it's the kind of work that students have done in undergraduate courses. This was this bunch of Belgian students who had come down some years ago, many years ago actually, and they had put together a study of a village settlement and of the inner city in Bangalore, Shivajinagar. This Shivan Chetty, and this is Mutanallur. So you have these very schematic drawings. They could even be more schematic than this, and then you have analysis of it. It doesn't really take a huge amount of time to build on.
I think we need to reinforce the fact that these are very quick studies. One really doesn't need to take too much time over them.
Yeah, so what we also do recommend is that the study tour really kicks off the whole semester, and then one gets into literally writing down your design intent and bringing in the studio problem. The whole semester we would like to intersperse with seminars which actually wind up informing students about the whole issue of housing. How do I go further than this?
Look in the slide, yeah.
Yeah. Project work will be done in 4 stages of activity interspersed with seminars. Yeah.
Yeah, so first we'd say introduction to the initial design parameters, which could include choices of things. Now this is something which we need to look at, whether an individual studio faculty could put together a set of choices. But we're quite clear that these are initial design parameters, and these are just to create an opportunity to explore issues. So for instance, you could choose different geographies and situations, and therefore defining a physical context.
And a historical context.
Or a historical context. You could choose a user group and or a development model.
Which again is not necessarily the urban elite. You could actually look at new townships, you could look at suburban India, you could look at even rural India, because things are transforming as faster than we can think, And if students don't actually go back and study these, they won't be available to us anymore, like the Sultanpet study.
Right. And another variable which we could look at is whether one should look at codes, bylaws, and other formal requirements. So the combination of all of these would set up the initial project. The second stage we would expect to be approaches and strategies to address issues of community, public and private realms, edge conditions, communication, connectivity. So what we're doing is that we are making perhaps an arbitrary choice of saying we'll work from large scale to small scale and then go back again. It could just as well have been done the other way around, but we felt that this could perhaps maybe open up issues on a larger level. So this could result in the generation of diagrams, models, exploring attitudes to site, allocation of built and unbuilt volumes, communication, connectivity.
So deliberately I would like to avoid using words like massing, which are probably hackneyed and grossly misinterpreted by students.
Yeah, figure ground, all of these, normal
terminology. Yeah. Approaches and strategies to address issues of personal and family user group needs. Here we put in user group because it doesn't have to be for families. We could have user groups which are students. They could be bachelors. They could be artist community. It actually could be anybody. So we could be designing a housing for various kinds of groups of people. Yeah. Group needs comfort, security, convenience, utility, and health. Now in semester 3, they have studied building services already. Okay, this one. They've done climatology, so they already are fairly well versed in what things are involved in the whole, in the process of designing. Yeah. And it would be perfect if one could apply them immediately in the next semester. Yeah.
And then we'd expect, of course, then we get to negotiation of the large scale, that's the communal and the intimate or personal approaches to the design of housing and their integration. Of course, this could also happen during the earlier stages, and alternate strategies should still be explored. So we do see this as one possibility of conducting a housing studio.
But the main difference we are making is that we are not starting with the dwelling, we are starting with the public place and the community space. So you start your design studio by really looking at your approach to public realm, and then you go on to the more personal. Yeah, the seminar format, we feel that the students in the class could be divided into groups that attempt to explore these issues and present them to the rest. Yeah.
The seminars we've divided into two sets. I think the first, really, I think we can just...
Yeah. Now, there are various kinds of requirements for shelter. Typically, I mean, according to the dictionary, a shelter is generally a temporary home. But temporary homes also are now soon forming a large part of the kind of homes that the human population requires, thanks to migration, war, and various kinds of disaster. And I don't know if we could at all ignore a study of emergency shelters. Some types of regional and traditional rural house form, some types of traditional urban house form, housing for and by the urban poor, directions in urban housing in history, and some contemporary directions in urban and rural housing. What we find largely is during the case study part of a housing semester, students generally just
they visit like an apartment building or a group housing, and they get the drawings from the builder, and it's a very dry and
only one-sided
futile exercise.
And a one-sided set of case studies, normally 5 case studies by 5 of building projects by 5 large builders in the city, and that is an extremely lopsided way of looking at housing and housing needs. Yeah, this is the second seminar format, Introduction of Contemporary Indian Issues Related to Housing. These are just introductions to indigenous building technologies, and the fact that we have institutes like the CBRI, the NIRD, that is the National Institute of Rural Development, the AMPRI. I think students should at least be aware that these things exist, that there is something called the CBRI, and there is something called the NIRD and the BMTPC. You cannot not know that you have institutes in the country which are actually developing new technologies and adapting the old ones, and also training people to build. At the same time, which I haven't mentioned, yeah, HUDCO, NHB, Indira Awas Yojana are various financing schemes. At least one should be aware, not scheme financing bodies, at least they should be aware that these things are available to the, rural poor and urban poor for building. And HUDCO and NHB themselves are not only, they have these large schemes all over the country where they actually develop townships. And if students are not even haven't heard the word HUDCO till they pass out, I think it's an extremely tragic situation, but that's really the way it is.
I think the idea is that when we expose them to the whole spectrum of housing related issues, they can actually start developing their own approach towards the actual design of housing.
Yeah. The draft National Right to Homestead Bill, it's been talked about a lot. It's yet to be passed in Parliament, but yeah. Oh, we are done. Okay. Okay. Oh, we are almost done.
Yeah, almost done.
Yeah, so we like to break it up like this. 1 week for the travel and study tour right in the beginning. You have projects with stage 1 and 2 for 3 weeks, and then you bring in seminar A, where they actually go out and document, look at, sketch, represent in various ways, and understand various kinds of housing that is actually available, which the human species has built. And then you have the third stage of your project, another 4 weeks. And you have the second seminar, which actually is again putting together of various information available to you on the nature of various statutes, bylaws, financing bodies, and eventually you have stage 4 where you have time to develop your project, and the presentation for the final juries. What I haven't mentioned here is that we recommend that no project site is larger than 2,000 square meters. I'd like to actually go out and say that we should not attempt doing a project on anything more than 2,000 square meters. Because I'd like to actually, unless one actually specifies it, we wind up doing acres and acres of work. Yeah.
Thank you.